So some sad news, everyone, I'm afraid to say. I lost my best friend. As a few of you know, my 14-year-old Labradoodle, Daisy, wasn't very well. She had a degenerative condition called degenerative myelopathy, which is a neurodegenerative disease affecting the nerve fibers of the spine. And over time, it affects the hind legs with loss of movement. Then it progresses up to the front legs, and then it progresses to the heart and the lungs. And unfortunately, there's no known cure. The small positive with this condition is that there's no pain involved for the animal. And when we had the diagnosis, we knew we were on limited time. We knew there wasn't a cure. And on one hand, that was really, really hard news to get. But on the other hand, we knew what was coming. It allowed us to shift our focus and shift our attention to be able to give her the care and the love that she needed. And we thought she was doing quite well with it. It was developing relatively slowly to what we had read about and to what we had been told. And we thought we had a while. We would go through periods where she didn't want to move much. She would spend a lot of the day lying down and sleeping. But then after a couple of days, she'd look fine again. And she would look fine again for a week or so. And then there would be another period of deterioration. Then about 2 weeks ago, we were in the position where she was able to move around. She was able to get outside, to go to the toilet, or to spend some time out in the garden or in the sun. She could get to her food bowl to feed herself. She could get to her water bowl for a drink. There were times when she would stumble or trip around the house, but it wasn't enough to require some form of mobility aid. She still had a relatively good quality of life. She could still join in with family activities in the house, and she could attend to her basic needs. But she had stopped wanting to go out for walks. She didn't want to go to the park. She didn't want to even walk around the block. And she pretty much became a house and a garden dog. But she was still full of spirit. She still had that sparkle. And then last week, she very quickly got to the point where she was limping really badly in both of her hind legs when she walked. She wasn't indicating any obvious pain, and we weren't sure whether this was part of the disease or whether she had hurt herself as she had tripped and pulled a muscle. So we kept an eye on her for the day. And then the next day, she couldn't get up at all. And I think it was at this point we realised that she wasn't going to improve. And her quality of life was deteriorating very, very quickly at this point. She would try to get up, but she couldn't. It was a real struggle for her. She couldn't weight bear on those back legs. So we'd help her up. Once she was up, she could move to some extent. We'd have to help her with a sling that we made so we could help her get to wherever she wanted to go, get to what she wanted. But obviously by that point, she was very much dependent on us. So we knew what was coming. And we were just clinging on to some hope that somehow, despite it being medically impossible, that she would get better. The next day, she couldn't move her front legs at all. So it progressed up the spine into her front legs. And all she could do was just lie there. And then during that day, it quickly became apparent that she was struggling to breathe properly. She was dying. So we made the only decision that we could in that moment. We called the vet. And she died as comfortably as we could make it. So why do I say I lost my best friend? Well, she was. People who watch my channel or my reaction channel probably know that I spent a while in the army, about 13 years. And something that happens with military life is you move a lot. A lot. The unit that I was in was one of those units that don't all move around together. So, for example, a lot of infantry corps, they all move with each other. The whole unit gets up and relocates at the same time. So all the personnel who know each other move with each other. My unit didn't do that. We moved as individuals. And in the 13 years, I had 8 different postings, and that doesn't include operational tours. So I moved at least 8 times during that time. And I've actually moved a few times since leaving the military as well. So the reality was, and still is to some extent, I had very, very few really close friends, apart from my wife. So you can see where this is heading. I was in the army when I got Daisy. She was 1 year old. She was a rehome. And along with my wife, she was a constant in my life. She was always there when I needed comfort. She was there during the really shit times of my life. And through the really good times, such as the birth of my children. She was there every day without fail. No judgments from her. No real demands from me, just completely attuned to my own emotional state and knowing what I needed. Oh. So it's a big adjustment not to have her around. And in terms of bereavements, I've been really lucky. It's been many years since I've been through this. It's been so long that I've forgotten how hard it is and the impact it has on you. So it's been about a week, and that has been a roller coaster of emotions. Changes in thought processes, changes in behaviours. And I noticed that my thoughts had turned toward the negative. These thoughts starting to creep in, unrelated to Daisy, just general thoughts around what I'm doing with my life, creeping in about making videos, whether my videos are good enough, whether I am good enough, imposter syndrome sneaking in, excuses sneaking in to not do things. I don't feel good enough about myself to film right now. It's too noisy. I look like shit. The room is messy. The background is boring. I've got nothing to say. Just anything to give me an excuse not to create content, not to film. Thoughts that I would usually have to some degree, but I'd have the skill to not listen to them. I'd have the skill to distance myself from those thoughts so they didn't interfere with my behaviours. But I've now found, especially in the last week, I found myself paying attention to them a lot more than I should be. And I guess this is expected. That idea of discounting the positive and focusing on the negative, when you're feeling low. If you go into town and you visit 10 shops and 9 of them have amazing service, but one has shockingly bad service, then that's the one you remember about going into town. That's the one you tell people about when they ask you how your day has been. And I've spent some days feeling angry, like so angry at everything. It felt like an injustice. It felt like I wasn't given enough time with her. But the reality was I did, and I was. She was 14. That's a pretty good innings. And she had the best life we could offer her. And I spent some time thinking more about the existential points of life. What's really important? How should I be spending my time? What should I be chasing? I have all this stuff. I seem to have accumulated an abundance of stuff, of everything, of electronics, of tripods, of microphones, of electronics, of clothes, just stuff. It's all around me. None of it really matters. I often ask my clients this question. You take a coin, and that coin represents something in your life. So in this case, Daisy. One side of the coin are the wonderful things she brought into my life. All the good memories, all of that brightness, all of that love. And on the other side is all that painful stuff. When she hurts herself, when she's sick, the worry, the pain. And the question is, as those two sides are of the same coin, you could give up the painful side, but you'd also have to give up the good side. And would you? If you'd asked me that a week ago, I would have given the coin up. The pain was too much. If you ask me now, I wouldn't in a million years give that coin up. That's interesting because it's very rare for a client to say they would give the coin up. And I've always made the assumption that they wouldn't. But now I know where the answer of yes, I would comes from. I think over time that answer might change, but I think there is a time when the answer is yes, I would give up the coin. And I've spent time feeling guilty. Guilty that I'm feeling so much pain over a dog who had a really good life. When there are people out there with present, ongoing problems and are living in some form of pain every day, what I have experienced over the last week, they are experiencing all the time. I've got friends who have lost kids. I can't imagine the pain of that. I don't know how you move forward from that. I feel guilty about making the choice to end the life of an animal, despite it being the most compassionate and best decision in that moment. And then I've spent a few days in this strange cycle of not being motivated to do anything at all, but at the same time wanting to keep busy so I didn't have to think about it. Because when I did think about it, it would hurt so much. Pretty much the exact maintenance cycles I talk about with my clients. Don't distract because it doesn't work in the long term. You have to feel it at some point. The point of therapy is not to feel better, but to get better at feeling. And I wasn't allowing myself to experience the loss fully. And I knew this was the case because I was getting intrusive thoughts as my brain wanted to process it. The first few times I had intrusive memories, no thank you, I push them away. I'm a therapist, I specialise in trauma. I knew this wasn't going to work. In fact, whilst I was doing this, whilst I was trying to push and keep this away from me, I had such a vivid dream of Daisy still being alive. It was so real. I remember I could feel the warmth of her body as I touched her. I could feel it. And then I woke up. I went downstairs so I wouldn't wake my wife, and I just sobbed for a long time. And I stayed present with it. I tried to have some acceptance and some willingness to feel it. I made myself feel, and it sucked. But I knew it was something I had to do. I knew it was something I was going to have to do eventually. So how are things now? How are things like today? Well, the ball feels like it's getting smaller. If you come across that ball and the box metaphor for grief, I'll see if I can put something on the screen. But essentially you have a box, and within that box there's a big ball, and on one side of the box there's a pain button, and when that ball is really big it bounces around the box and it frequently hits the pain button. And some days it feels like that pain button is just getting smashed over and over again. And as time goes on, the ball in the box gets smaller, and because it's smaller it can move around, it can bounce around the box more without hitting the pain button as often. But when it does hit that pain button, boy, you know it. It can come from nowhere, and it reminds you of what you lost. Now, this can be caused by small reminders like a song that reminds you of what you've lost, or a smell, or something on TV. In my case, it's things like hearing a sound in the house, in another room, because she used to obviously move around the house whilst I was working, and I'll hear like scratching noise, and I'll think, oh, it's her claws on the floor. See, pain button. Oh. But the times that this is happening are getting fewer and fewer. So my ball in the box is getting smaller and smaller. And I think that's a consequence of time and natural healing. So this experience has left me reevaluating how I spend some of my time and what really matters to me, and how much focus I'm putting on certain things and what I really care about. I think it's also affected me as a therapist. Now, I know everyone has different experiences through life, but feeling this pain, though not comparable to anyone else's, has made me reflect upon what my clients might be feeling when I talk to them, and that desire to push painful thoughts away and reluctance to feel that pain. When I'm asking them to sit there and feel, I'm understanding a lot more what they are going through. I know it's not exactly the same, but it's given me a better understanding. I think it's made... So, I don't really know what the point of this video is all about. It feels good to talk about this. For me, I think it's helped me to process this and to reflect. And I guess in some ways I wanted to kind of normalize this experience to some extent, although I appreciate everyone grieves differently. And just so you get to know me a bit better on this channel, and that I, despite being a therapist, I'm a genuine human being. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you have a pet, go and give them a cuddle. Take care, everyone.